Okay, so now we're going to work with M files. Until now, we've been writing in the command window where we've had the chevrons at the start of the line. As I say, this is a great way of doing small bits of code like we've been doing, figuring things out, testing doing little calculations. But you'll find that it's a very temporary way of writing code. If you want to rerun something you've written in the command line, it's not trivial. You have to press up key to find your previous commands, and it's just a messy way of working. What you normally want to do is, after you've figured something out in your command window, move up into the text editor part of the screen and begin solidifying your code there so that you can run it again and again. You can send it to people. You can edit things without having to retype them. It's just a better way of working when you're working with more than one or two commands at once. Now, when you're working with M files, there's two different ways of working, both of which are just text in an M file. They're just MATLAB commands in an M file. But sometimes we're going to write a script, and sometimes we're going to define a function. The difference between the two isn't super critical right now. Both of them are going to contain just lines of MATLAB code within a text file, but a function is going to have a specified bit of code at the start, which tells MATLAB what this specific file does, what it expects as inputs, and what it expects as outputs. So functions are a little more rigorous than scripts. If you're writing a function, it's a bit of code with some defined inputs and some defined outputs. If you're writing a script and you're just trying to store some commands that you've run before so you can run them again, you don't need to worry about the start of the file. You don't need to worry about defining inputs and outputs. You just put your MATLAB commands in the editor, and you'll be able to run them again and again. So we'll see examples of both of these. I think we're going to start with a script. If you don't see the editor window, hit this new script button on the top of your window. You may find it pops out rather than being docked in the editor. So if you look at my MATLAB, I have no editor window right now. None of these panels start with the word editor. But if I hit new script at the top left, it pops up. Mine has automatically docked in, and you can see the word editor here. You may find yours is floating like this. If you like to work like that, that's fine. If you have multiple monitors, you might want to put this on one screen and work with your command window on the other. But if you want it docked in, there's a little arrow here on my version of MATLAB that's and you can hit this dock editor, and it will dock it and clip it into the screen, so you've got everything nicely arranged. So now we have the command window down here, and we have our editor up ready to write MATLAB in the top. We write the same MATLAB code that we've been learning, but the difference is now we can run it again and again without having to retype it. Okay. So what I want you to do is an alternative to hitting new script is you can actually type edit or edit my new file in your command window, and it will also start editing a document. So you'll notice that if I type edit space mynewfile.m, it creates a mynewfile in the current folder, and the tab that I'm working with has the name mynewfile.m. So let me just show that over here. If I have no editor open, what I can type is edit mynewfile.m, and it will launch an editor with my new file open. It happens my new file is defined for me, so I can do edit another file.m. It's created another blank document, and you'll see another file has arrived over here. So if you hit new script, you'll notice it's untitled. You then need to do save as, or just save, and it will prompt you to give it a name. And if I call this my workshop script and hit save, now you'll see that the top of my tab has changed to my workshop script, and on the left-hand side of the screen, that file is now in my working directory. So there's a bunch of ways of starting scripts.
What's the difference between the format M and MAT?
So the MAT file, we now have an MAT file in our workspace. and we have an M file in our workspace. The MAT file contains these variables. So a .mat file is storing variables, and a .m file is storing MATLAB code. So if I want to do, remember I can load my file, and it will load those variables into the workspace. Even if I delete these variables, I can either right-click and delete them, or I can do clear all. I have no variables. If I do load my file.mat, I now have variables again, whereas these files will contain the code that we're going to write. So they're two different uses, and they have different little icons over here too.
I didn't see how you actually create that mat file. You did that in the command window?
The .mat file that's here, we did previously when we did save my file.mat and then load my file.mat. So if you have a bunch of variables, just to recap, if you do save my variables, then hit enter, it will create a myvariables.mat file in your current folder. And then you can clear all your variables, you can close MATLAB, you can go home, and you can come back and you can do load my variables, and it will load those variables back into the workspace.
So like the .mat has only variables, and the .m is actually a script that have all the code.
Correct, yes. And the .m files will always contain MATLAB code. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to create our first script. We're going to do this in the editor window. You'll see I'm in my editor window. Mine's called mynewfile.m, but call yours whatever you want to call it, as long as it reminds you of what the file actually contains. And then line by line, we're going to type our MATLAB code. We're going to end each line with a semicolon because we don't want any output. And we're going to first define 3 variables. So we know how to define variables. You put the variable name on the left-hand side of an equal sign, and the variable value on the right-hand side of it. So genes expression 1 is a variable that I'm giving the value 260, gene expression 2, 58, gene expression 3, 79. So these might be 3 expression values for our genes of interest. I can then create a variable called total genes and set that equal to the value of adding our 3 genes together. So gene expression 1 plus gene expression 2 plus gene expression 3. And then I'm going to create one more variable called average genes and set that equal to the value of our total genes divided by 3. And that will divide this total by 3. And the very final line of our code is to display that average genes variable that we've just created. So it will just print that final value that is the sum of all our genes divided by the number of our genes to the screen, and we should see some value returned. So when you've typed all those lines, make sure it's saved. You can do Command and S, or you can go to the Save button in the ribbon at the top. Then you should see a Run button. If you don't see a Run button at the top, click into the script. Make sure that the thing that's highlighted is the editor window where it says My New File. Click into there. It should get a blue border, and the ribbon should update so that the Editor tab is highlighted, and then you should have a nice big green Run button that you can hit, and it will run your entire script. And you should see something printed to the screen. The alternative to running the script with the Run button is to just type the name of your script into the command window. They both do the same thing. So if you type My New File and hit Enter, making sure the capitalization is the same, you don't need to give the .m here. So if you wrote your script as mynewfile.m, you actually don't need to run it with the .m, you just run My New File. MATLAB knows to look for M files. You can type My New File in the command window, hit Enter, and it will run the script. Exactly the same as if you press the Run command. In fact, if you press the Run command, you should see My New File appear in the command window. It's like MATLAB automatically typed it for you.
Should we not give a title for the script, open it for the new script?
So if you start a script by hitting New, it will be untitled. So I then type some code, And then I can either do save as, give it a name. So if I give it the name my script, now the top will have become my script. And now I can run it by typing my script in here. So once you've saved it, the tab will update. You can also save with Command and S or whatever, Control S on Windows. But that's how you would make sure the tab is updated and make sure that you can now run your script with the name. Your script won't appear in the workspace until it's been saved, so while it says untitled in the top, you won't be able to run it. Another thing to be aware of, notice if you look at the myscript.m tab here, if I start typing, so I'm typing some new code here, there's a small star, an asterisk has appeared after the M. That means that this file has been edited, and if I run it right now, it might not run the latest version. So there's been some changes in this file that haven't been saved. If I hit Command and S or Control and S, it will save it, the star will go away, and now I know that if I run my script, it's going to run the latest version. So be aware if something's not quite right, your code's not getting what you expect it to do, make sure you've not got a star next to your tab where you're working. So who gets a result back? Who is able to run a script? Got some nodding? Great. Anyone not able to get it to work? And anyone getting a different number to me?
Another question about the workspace. So how do you clear out the variables in that workspace? So just the variables from this?
So if you do, you might find your workspace is getting cluttered now with a bunch of variables, and you want to get rid of them. So you can either do clear all, or you can clear individual variables with, if I want to get rid of A, I can just do clear A. Even if you want to just right-click on a variable and do delete, you can do that too. Get rid of specific variables, whatever you need to clear up your workspace. Okay. So as you've noticed, scripts create variables in the workspace. You might not be used to this if you're working with other languages. Sometimes variables stay within the function they're written. Here in MATLAB, because we've just written a script file, it's creating variables in the workspace and works exactly the same as if we were to type those commands individually into the command window. So running a script that contains a bunch of commands is going to do exactly the same things to the workspace and any data that we work with as typing those commands in one by one would in the command window.
So then if you clear out the variables and then try to run your script, will it work?
Yeah, if you clear out the variables with clear all, you can then run it again, and you'll find that it recreates the variables because the first 3 lines of our files are creating those variables. So it's something to be aware of. If you may find while you're developing in MATLAB that your code works, you clear out your variables, or you come back the next day and your code doesn't work anymore. It's because you were relying on variables that were in the workspace but were not defined in your script. So make sure when you start working with a script that the first few lines define all the variables you need to work with, or at least be aware that you need to define any variables and don't presume that variables are going to be there from your workspace. It's a bad habit to get into that you often find people write a script, run it, it creates a bunch of variables, they then run another script that relies on those variables, they run another script that relies on the variables created there, and you end up having to run your certain scripts in certain orders to set up variables in your workspace, and it's just a bad habit to get into. It's much better to ensure that each script is somewhat self-contained, creates all the variables it needs, or at least loads them from a file. So if you want one script to load the variables created by another script, I would encourage you to finish one script with a save command, begin the next script with a load command to make sure that you are loading all the expected variables that you expect, and that if someone typed clear in between, it wouldn't break everything. So yeah, be aware of the scope of your variables that you're expecting. Never expect them to be there in the workspace unless you specifically load them or create them in your script.
What if I only want to try a couple lines instead of whole thing?
Okay, so if you want to, that's one of the advantages of MATLAB, is that you can go through code one line at a time. without, so let me just write a couple of lines. Hi, A equals 5, A equals 4, B equals 5. Then let's disp A. Oop. Okay, so I have my script. I'm going to hit run, and it will run the whole thing. It'll print hi to the screen. It'll print the number 4. Note that I might want to put a new line character here. And what I can do instead is put a breakpoint in here. So many development environments in many code allow you to have these breakpoints. What a breakpoint is it means run the code to this point and then stop. So if I want to run the code until the first line, so basically I'm not doing anything yet, I click this little, next to the line numbers, you should see little dashes. And if you click on those, you create little red dots that mean break here, stop running code here. So if I hit run now, nothing has been printed to the screen. It is waiting with a little green arrow next to the little red dot, telling me that this is the line that's about to run. Now I have all sorts of debugging functions, which we'll come across in more details later, but now I can hit step. It will do that one line. I can hit step again. It will do the next line. So one by one, you'll see that it's updating the A. It's about to update B. I hit step. It's updated B. I hit step again. It's going to display A to the screen. And now it's finished. So put a breakpoint in your code, run it, and then hit step to go through line by line. It's a great way of debugging. It's a great way of figuring out what's going on. You can see variables being created one by one. It's a good learning tool. And it's also good for when you screw up, to find out what you screwed up. Okay.